Building custom villages is one of my favourite things to do in Minecraft. For me, there's nothing more enjoyable than putting something together that feels so full of life. You can just imagine your creation bustling with activity. Or if you incorporate actual villagers into the project, you can kind of give it its own soul, which is very cool to sit back and watch them all work away. During my time playing this game, I've made a grand total of 15 different villages, towns, or cities. So I thought in this video I'd share them all with you wonderful people in hopes to inspire you to create your very own custom village. We'll start with my most recent village build, which is this treetop jungle village that I made in the last episode of my Let's Play. I wanted to make something with the new bamboo wood, so what better option than to construct 14 unique tree houses towering above the jungle biome, all with interconnecting pathways so that the villagers that I have living inside of these huts can actually move around freely without fear of falling off. I specifically have 14 houses in total so that each villager profession, which there are 13 of, could have their own building to live and work in. Then the one remaining treehouse is the town hall where they all congregate for a little catch up during the day. I had a lot of fun building this. I think it's a little bit different to what you might usually expect from a custom village. Unlike this next one, which is in the classic medieval architecture style, everybody and their mother has made a build in Minecraft that resembles something from medieval times. The era, not the restaurant. And for good reason. This game is very well suited to this style, and despite potentially being overdone, I do think it makes for a really good starting point if it's your first custom village project. Mainly because there's so much to reference out there already on the web, whether it be Minecraft builds, concept art, or real life photos of buildings that are still standing from the Middle Ages. Basically, you've got plenty of inspiration to help you along the way. And for those of you wondering, this is my village of Mecklen's Vale. Some of you will recognise this place if you ever watched my Techtopia series. Put very simply, Techtopia is an incredible villager mod made by Tango Tech, and we had a whole series where we built multiple towns that were absolutely brimming with life. We'll be returning to some more of them in this video. In fact, let's take a look at another one right now. This is Eriduin, my fantasy elvish village. This one is actually kinda similar to Mecklen's Vale in some ways, except much more fantastical, as you can see from the exaggerated details and colourful roofs, for example. I'd say this is another good starting point, as you can find lots of inspiration for fantasy buildings, which you can then take in pretty much any direction that you choose. That's kind of the point of fantasy. It doesn't exactly exist, so there's no right or wrong way to do it, allowing you much more creative freedom. It's especially helpful if you don't want to just build something super realistic. That way you can just kind of make up the rules and reasons for why something is built the way that it is. And I should mention, don't feel like you have to build something exactly in a certain style. Feel free to change things up, maybe by making a hybrid of multiple styles or just loosening the restraints so that you have a bit more fun with it. Alternatively, you may enjoy building something super realistically. Doing all of the research alongside constructing the actual village might be more your cup of tea. Next up, we have my tiny mesa fishing village, compiled of 17 differently dyed terracotta houses, making for this very colourful community. It's partially inspired by the favelas of Brazil, where you would find houses all very closely piled together, with some even stacked on top of each other, giving it that very close-quartered feeling to walk around in. The other part of inspiration is from the various small towns found on the Italian coasts, mainly the villages of Cinque Terre, or the Five Lands as it's translated. I visited there some time ago and just adored the vibrancy of all of the houses, and ever since then I wanted to build something like it in Minecraft, so I did. Now you may notice this village is pretty small. It might not even count as a village to some people, and to be honest, that's okay. When you build your own custom town, it doesn't have to be massive and take you an eternity to build. Although it is super rewarding to finish a big village project, the thought of starting it can be quite daunting, so don't feel ashamed if you want to do something a bit smaller to begin with. Besides, you can always add on to it or build something bigger elsewhere. So we'll go from one of my smallest villages to quite possibly my biggest, at least my most time consuming. This is Fisher's Nest. We spent nearly half of the first season of my survival series working on this place, around 24 episodes in total I believe, and it was definitely worth it. I come back and reference this project a lot in all of my other videos, and it's mainly because I am very proud of it, to be completely honest with you. Walking around this village, I am totally immersed, which is what I was aiming for when I first started building. There's not a single nook, cranny or crevice in this entire place which has been overlooked. I went heavy on the details, hence why it took so long. All of the villagers running around doing their own jobs really helps too. As for the style, I didn't really have one, but I suppose if it landed on any, it probably would be medieval. But I do remember being inspired by the town of Beauclair from The Witcher 3. Looking at it now, the resemblance isn't really there. This is a very Renaissance style, which isn't quite the same for Fisher's Nest. It doesn't exactly have the same level of grandeur, which is okay. Not everything has to be a replica. As long as something gets you inspired to place blocks, that's all that really counts. In this village, I made a specific house for all of the villager profession types, and I eventually got round to making a tutorial for every single one of them. Once I had finished those, I decided to build a small village, very similar to Fisher's Nest of course, consisting of all of those villager houses. So even though it's not exactly a different style, who knows, it might still spark an idea, so I thought I'd show it off anyway. Let's zip forward in time slightly to my futuristic ocean city of Altora X, another addition from my Techtopia world. This was a much different project to the rest of my custom villages, mainly due to the symmetry of it all. My other projects are much more all over the place, shall we say. This one was quite the contrast. Not only is the style much more sterile and clean, but the layout is entirely centered around the Guardian farm. Mainly so that I could craft sea lanterns, but it meant that before I even started building, I knew where pretty much everything was gonna go. Now, honestly, it did make building easier. I spent less time finagling over all of the small details and just built these great big structures one by one on all of the platforms. So if you maybe find it easier to do that sort of building where it's a bit more regimented, a futuristic or even modern city might be more your style to try out. Another one of my smaller communities is this pirate-inspired jungle village, complete with multiple small huts to live in, a big old pirate ship, and a volcanic island built from scratch. This is just a good example that it doesn't always have to be an architecture style that you base your village on, it can be a theme instead. In this case, as you may have guessed, it's pirates. I made this with the intent of giving it a bit of a story too, which helped me along the way in the building process. The idea was that a small ship crashed into the land, the pirates then set up camp on the beach to begin with, expanded into the sparse jungle behind them, and over time eventually built this much larger ship to sail away on. And there also happened to be a big volcano nearby that served no purpose in the story other than it looked pretty cool. So if you're a bit stuck on what to build in your village, maybe try incorporating some lore into it. I kind of did that with this village too. The Undergrowth is its name, which as you can see is built entirely within a ravine. The idea was that something had driven this group of villagers underground. I think we decided on a dragon in the end, hence the scorched earth above the ravine, which sent the residents who once lived above ground down underground to reside in a dwarven-inspired village. I really quite like the uniqueness of this one, especially when you see the Techtopia villagers wandering around using all of the different levels to get from place to place. But an underground village is a great thing to build if you're not particularly fond of building exteriors. I know I never was, that's why everything in my older worlds was underground. So if the idea of making a whole lot of buildings out in the open is a bit overwhelming, just head underground and hide away. It wasn't only a bamboo village I made upon the release of 1.20, I also created this Japanese-inspired village in the cherry blossom biome. I've been wanting to create some kind of oriental village in Minecraft for a very long time now, and I still plan to do a much bigger one than this in my Let's Play at some point. But this was just a little taste of what it could look like on a small scale. Now of course, to build in a cherry blossom biome you don't need to stick to a Japanese style, but I do think it's pretty well suited given the cherry blossom trees. The houses are simple enough, all looking similar whilst varying in shape and size, but the main attraction of course is the big pagoda in the centre, which definitely completes the look. We've also got a couple of torii gates as entrances, which I think is a nice touch. As I'm sure you can tell, I really enjoy using the new blocks when they get released in an update, hence why I also made a very quaint Riverside Village in the mangrove swamp just after we got our hands on the wild update. This is another one of my smaller and simpler villages, but I really like it. I don't think a village any bigger than this would have particularly suited the dilapidated style of all of the crumbling houses and rickety bridges. Once again, going to show that you don't always need to build big to build effectively. It's also a good example of building your village around a specific piece of terrain, in this case a river. If you're not sure where to set up your custom village, just have a scout around in your world for some cool terrain generation that might perhaps give you an idea for what you could build around it. Then you can almost envision the final product before you've even built anything. Let's take a look at my final Techtopia village to show off, which just so happens to be what I think is my favourite of the 5. It's hard to pick. I have a very soft spot for all of them, but if I had to, it would be Asteria. This is my desert village, which is inspired by a mix of Arabian and Egyptian architecture. I briefly mentioned earlier about combining multiple styles into one, which is exactly what I've done here. I will say, like most of my villages, I'm not going for realism, but we do have elements of both quite clearly on display. The domed roofs and hyper-detailed walls for the Arabian side of things, and of course some pyramid structures for the Egyptian. The rest of the buildings are just what I presume to be a typical desert house, all with some sort of purpose. I also really like Asteria for its defensiveness. The giant wall around the city comes in very handy for keeping the villagers inside safe. So if you've got a problem with your villagers being eaten by zombies, maybe a wall of some kind might be worth looking into first. Finally, I have just 3 more villages to slap on to the end of the video here, and they just so happen to be the first custom villages I ever made in Minecraft, unless I'm forgetting any, which is entirely possible. Sadly, I no longer have this world, so my footage is quite limited here, but the first village that I ever built was, you'll never guess, a medieval village. I can't lie, these are all so old that I've forgotten the names of them, if they even have any, that is. The next one is yet another treetop jungle village, but this time centered around a Mayan temple. I remember trying to do a bit of research on Mesoamerica for this one to create some realistic elements, although given my building skills at the time, I'm not too sure how well it correlated. And lastly, we have my unfinished ice village, which looks super funky right now, but that's because at the time I was playing with a resource pack, so try and believe me when I say it looked a little bit better than this. But it's more so the ideas in this video that I'm trying to get across as opposed to the actual building. So I'm sure if you decided to build your own snowy village, not only would it probably look a bit different to this, but you'd also probably finish it in the end. So there we go everybody, those are all 15 of my custom villages that I've made during my time playing Minecraft. I hope these were able to inspire you with some ideas of what you could build yourself in your own world. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.